as a background, I'll pose this as a question. Where do you think we have to use a formal business procedure in Toastmasters, and where is it specified? Perhaps any use of club funds needs to be debated in a fair and open manner. Furthermore, a vote to induct a new member. I'm sure all of you have been familiar with conducting this particular voting procedure. And the reason why we escort the new member out of the room is that it would be a conflict of interest for the new member. Otherwise, it's a standard vote that would be done just as normal. The main principle is make sure that all are heard. Making sure that everyone is heard fairly is why in a business meeting, the chair shall acknowledge the speaker standing before they are entitled to speak with their motion. At first, to many new Toastmasters, some had once indicated that this would be seen as rude. However, the purpose of this is to maintain justice and courtesy for all. Do only one thing at a time. From an example that I had someone place a motion, and then a second member, then counter with a completely new motion and jumping in and debating without ever being recognized by the chair. The chair had in fact not called for a seconder on the motion. This could effectively reduce debate and not give fairness to all people, and it's trying to conduct two items of business at once, which is also never permitted. The majority rules. A motion will require either a simple majority, which is 50% of members plus one, or a 2/3 majority. There are 3 special motions where you need to have a 2/3 majority to pass. Does anyone know what those are?
I know last year, I think it was 2/3 majority for those 2 motions that were brought up. Were they not in the August conference? I don't know what they were. There were 2 things that we had to vote on.
Motions.
If you have to do a change to your club constitution, you would need to have 2/3 of the club.
Yes. That's a special case, and that is one of them. But it's not the 3 general cases that we would see. One of them is an appeal. The other is to close or limit debate. And the third is suspending rules. The minority must be heard. In a procedure, we allow all people who want to speak either for or against the motion before calling for a vote, except where we close or limit debate by a special motion. What we want to do is to facilitate action, not to obstruct it. And from my experience, parliamentary procedure on the use of club funds and on meeting dates meant that decisions got made efficiently and promptly. While it might seem drawn out at first, it is one of the most effective ways to make sure that prompt decisions are made. Here is the chart. This is something I was gifted from my old club, Carlingwood Toastmasters, as they were clearing out some of their old documents. This happened to be one of the original documents from when that club chartered in the early 1960s. This shows all of the different motions that we would have to consider in a Toastmasters environment. The first two, fixing the time of next meeting and to adjourn, in the context of a regular club meeting, the first two would not apply. However, in a special executive meeting or a special meeting, those two motions may be used. We always move from left to right across the table. The first one is highlighted, which I will start with. This is the main question, comment, announcement, or motion. This is the most common case. All notices of information in any business meeting should be here. It is not permitted to interrupt the chair or anyone else who is speaking. However, someone could raise and say, Mr. Chair or Madam Chair, and then wait in silence to be recognized. That would be permissible. The only interruption or signal is to bring the attention of the chair. The chair decides who speaks when and must let everyone have an opportunity. If it's a general announcement or comment, it would simply not go to the point of requiring a second. So we would look at the green arrow, go across. The mover, once recognized, can make his announcement or comment, and then it stops. If someone seconds the announcement, there could be further debate on it. And debaters must be recognized by the chair before speaking. First, I will go on is any motion, an announcement, or a comment that is not a special motion covered in the rest of the presentation is a main motion. I'll go into some of the more special things. A question of privilege. This would be the temperature of the room and audio quality issues to remind someone if a microphone is turned off. If the chair does not address this, someone may interrupt to indicate that they cannot hear them speaking. That is a permissible question of privilege. And questions of privilege are then decided by the chair. There is no voting here. It is the only type of motion where a chair would make an executive decision. First, now we'll look at the main motions, which we can amend a motion. This is the second most common order of business we have in Toastmasters. It applies usually only to main motions. But it may apply to 3 procedural motions, either closing debate, referring, or postponing a meeting. Here is how the process works in the case of an amendment. The chair calls for items of business. A member raises a motion upon being recognized. A seconder is received. Then we go to the debate of the motion. The initial mover in a motion always has the first word in the debate. This comes from parliamentary procedure in particular and Robert's rules. This is a specific debating feature of that method where the mover always gets the first word, and then it opens up to anyone either for or against after that. However, someone during the process of debate can propose and put an amendment on the floor. Debate on the main motion is stopped, and the chair will call for a seconder on the amendment. At that point, we would debate the amendment, with the amender getting the first word to debate the amendment portion. Then the amendment is voted. Once this amendment is voted, it goes back to the main motion. It can either then have further debate after an amendment has been passed. A second amendment can be proposed, at which point we would go through the triangular arrows a second time. Note that you cannot amend an amendment, but each amendment can be voted on, and a motion may have an unlimited number of amendments made to it. Then ultimately, once all debate has concluded and all amendments have been voted on first, then the main motion is finally voted on. And it must pass with a majority or any of the motion or resultant amendments to pass. This goes back to the principle of doing one thing at a time. Amendments must be discussed and debated in their entirety before it going back to the main motion. Here we have a point of order. This is something we seldom use in Toastmasters, while in the provincial and legislatures and federal parliament, points of order are mentioned and raised on an almost daily and multiple times daily basis. This only is to apply if the rules of procedure or organizational rules of order have been violated. May be raised by either the chair or another member and may interrupt the chair. It should relate to the principle, make sure all are heard. Point of order is procedural only. Now this item, orders of the day. It can be called if the business meeting reaches the end of its scheduled time in the agenda. This is a Toastmasters implementation. The chair has two options. They can either end the business meeting or call for a vote to extend. Note that in this is one of the three cases, it takes a 2/3 vote to pass. Because this, as mentioned earlier, a special vote to waive procedural form are the special votes that need a 2/3 majority. However, when someone calls orders of the day, another person could say, I object, which at my old club, Carlinwood Toastmasters in Ottawa, we would often torment each other just by doing those things. And then in that case, we then jump to an objection to a consideration. And a vote to postpone the orders of the day must be called in that case. Again, it's still 2/3 in favor to pass. Now I will go through some of the lesser used motions that we have. These are not very commonly seen in a Toastmasters meeting, but the chair shall be aware of it. Rescind or repeal a motion. My home club, Riverview Canusa, had done this back in March regarding an allocation of budget money for hybrid meetings, where we decided to repeal a motion for 2 additional meetings that we had planned, and realizing we would not likely be able to hold them. Repealing motions is quite uncommon, and it's a motion, an appeal that was previously passed at some prior meeting. The only difference is you cannot amend a repeal. An objection to consideration. This, other than the orders of the day case that I mentioned earlier, it's something that we very rarely use in Toastmasters. It is something that requires 2/3 vote to pass. Examples of use: if we're inducting a new member or voting out a member, either voting in or voting out a member, and the candidate is not removed from the room, that is a conflict of interest in either case, and an objection should be made in that case. Or if the club places forth something that is in contravention of Toastmasters conduct. For instance, a crazy motion, such as an example there. Hopefully that never happens in a Toastmasters club. But if it does, that's what a member can do to correct it. A motion to close debate. In the 5 years I've been in Toastmasters, this motion has only ever been used once. Usually orders of the day is called first. But this is if we have some long off-topic rant continues about a motion or comment. Therefore, during the debate of a main motion, someone can say, after the mover has spoken, people have spoken but for and against a motion, a member can then go, I move to close debate. And if someone seconds it, that goes to vote. Note, this is the third case of the 3 cases where it's a 2/3 vote to pass. Note, again, it's 2/3 majority because it's a suspension of procedural rules, where we are closing debate and potentially silencing certain people. That is why said motion needs a 2/3 majority. And once the close or limit debate motion is passed by a vote, then the main motion can be voted on immediately following. The motion to close debate is also not debatable in itself. Table a motion, I'm sorry, the arrow is in the wrong place. It should be lay on the table here. This is used to suspend a motion when we intend to resume it at an undefined point in the future. This proceeds to either a main motion or a reconsideration. Tabling requires a seconder and is not debatable and may not interrupt the chair. Here, postpone to either a certain day or indefinitely. I'll cover these together as they're reasonably similar. This, instead of tabling motion, this is the motion you would plan to use if you want to resume it at a predefined meeting or point in the future. And this vote proceeds immediately after the motion is seconded and may not interrupt the chair. Postponing indefinitely would not include this predefined point, and the mover would have to say, I move to postpone this item of business indefinitely. Revisit a tabled motion. This is if you want to come back from any motion, any time in the past that was previously tabled. Once the revisited tabled motion is passed, we then proceed back directly to the debate on the motion that was tabled. Similar to an amendment where we stopped and then resumed debate on the main motion, tabling a motion does the same thing, except over multiple meetings. Reconsider a motion. This is seldom used in Toastmasters, although what it would be used for is to reopen debate on a motion that had orders of the day called, for instance, and had been closed. This also requires a seconder to reopen debate. This is not something that I've ever seen used in the 5 years I've been in Toastmasters. Withdrawing a motion. This may only be made by the mover of the original motion. This, because of the lack of seconder and other items. However, if a mover has made a motion that is seconded and is open to debate, they have to get the permission of the club to rescind it before being debated on, before being voted on. Withdrawing a motion is only applicable before the vote on the motion takes place. When the mover announces they wish to withdraw the motion, the chair shall immediately conduct a vote asking the club, do you agree that Mr. X's motion on such a matter should be withdrawn at Mr. X's request? And if it majority votes yes, then the motion is dead. Now, how do we look at voting? Think of the secretary who is taking minutes for all these. This is why the chair shall always call all three, those in favor, those opposed, and those abstaining. If you don't call for all three, the secretary has no way of keeping complete minutes. Noting that if you think of an election result, it would always show all of the votes for even the lowest levels of candidates. A mistake I've seen many meeting chairs make is calling only for those in favor, and if it met the majority threshold, not calling for the opposed and abstentions. While it doesn't impact the vote per se in any way, it does lead to incomplete minutes. This also reinforces point number 4, the minority must be heard. And note that abstentions, people abstaining, do count towards the club established quorum, but do not count towards the majority or 2/3 majority required by a motion. Now, quorum. This is something that should be established in the club bylaws of every Toastmasters club. What we normally would have, if no bylaws are set, then the standard quorum is by default 50% plus 1 of total members. While less common, certain other quorums do exist. First thing, high quorums often exist for things such as on condominium boards, for instance. And the Parliament of Canada actually has one of the lowest quorums I've ever seen, at only 20 members or 6% of the House needed to pass legislation. It depends on the club. If you're in a large urban club, some of which have 50 to 60 members, and where members only show up to do their speeches and don't go otherwise, this is a case of transient membership. And the standard 50% plus 1 quorum would be effectively unattainable. In that case, a lower 25% or 1/3 quorum may be appropriate. This quorum can be changed and needs to be established in the club bylaws, however. The last item is how to deal with a tie. The rules of order provide for 3 possibilities. A tie automatically defeats a motion, and in this case, everyone votes, including the president and chair of the meeting. The president of the club has no right to vote except in the case to break a tie. And number 3 is the chair of the meeting that day withholds their vote to break the tie. Why 2 and 3 are separate is in the case where the club president may not be the person chairing the meeting. And in the case where the chair and the club president are different, there needs to be an established standard on who breaks the tie in that case. It could go either way. And I've seen both the Riverview Canusa Toastmasters Club uses tiebreaker method number 2, where the president of the club will break a tie. And in the absence, any tied motion would be forwarded to the club president after the meeting to cast their vote if the president was not there. That includes the main part of my presentation, and I would now like to proceed to questions if we have any.
That was well done. I'm wondering, Kristian, are you able to share the PowerPoint presentation?
Okay, to go over the procedure to welcome a new member to your club. This would be a main motion. Here. During the business session, the chair will call, are there any new items of business? Then any member, usually the vice president membership, but any member can do it, is I move to induct so-and-so as a member of this Toastmasters club. And then the motion is seconded. At that point, we then ask the sergeant at arms, in avoiding a conflict of interest, to escort the member out of the room while the debate happens. And then any members of the club can state for or against that new member, and then it can be amended. We could, and that new prospective member will be escorted out of the room until the vote on the main motion is passed. And that at that point, they would be allowed back into the room, either inducted into the club or not inducted. Note that an induction motion to induct a new member could be amended to say this member may be inducted next in 3 weeks' time, or amended as the club sees fit. And while the motion or any related amendment is being debated, that is when the new member, prospective member, has to be outside of the room. I hope that answers your question.
Will this presentation be available? Some people want it, or just to share it for other people that may want to read about it later?
I can make it available.
Because I know Al was asking there. So. I do have a question. You ever run into some clubs have a rule that says when they vote on stuff, it's just a majority of the people present in the room plus one? So if they have 9 members present at a meeting and they're voting on something, it's 50% plus one in the room. I've seen that in some of the club's constitutions. Maybe that's a bit of a no-no, but I've seen it.
Oftentimes what they'll say is 50% plus one of active members. And typically what being an active member would mean is you've either been at a meeting sometime within the last month normally. And however, for clubs that meet once a month, that's not as feasible to implement. Hence why 50% of those in the room might be used. But we should not be using that because it may not indicate that we'd always have a quorum in that case. There'd be no way there couldn't be a quorum. So that is not an appropriate quorum to use, as from what I would say personally. It should be at least the last 3. We should go back 3 or 4 Toastmasters meetings. Are there any further questions?
Can we have a demonstration of this? For example, we have a club members and then a new member is coming in, and how do you do it exactly? If a demonstration would be helpful.
Okay. So, would you play, if, let's say, if you were the chair, Mr. Jim Wisted, I'll be using you as the dummy example of the new member.
Okay.
Okay, so would you mind opening and calling, are there any items of new business?
Are there any items of new business?
Yes. I move to induct Jim Wisted as member of Sunday night chat example Toastmasters. Is there a seconder?
Second. I will second that.
Now that Marlene Clark
Marlene.
has put in that case, I would then ask Jim Wisted to move into the waiting room at this time while we conduct debate on the motion.
Mhm.
And just to pretend he's off in the waiting room right now.
Yeah.
Now, as the mover, I would then have the first word on the debate. I could say that Jim Wisted has attended the last 3 meetings and has shown a strong commitment to joining Toastmasters, and I feel he'd be a valuable asset in our club. The mover can only speak in favor of the motion. It would be a violation of parliamentary procedure for me as the mover to go and say, Jim Wisted was a lousy lame duck and will negatively criticize everyone. However, let's say, I don't know if Winifred Quack, let's say you had just said that by an example as a motion. Now, once we finish debate, we would then call for a vote. All those in favor of inducting Jim Wisted as a member of Example Toastmasters. And then 1, all those opposed, 1, and all those abstaining, 1. Therefore, 2. Therefore, with 1 in favor, 1 opposed, and 2 abstentions, we have a tied vote. Therefore, for this example, we will use, as there's no defined president, we will use the case, presumptive case, a tie automatically defeats a motion. Now, I will bring him back into the room.
And break the good news.
And Jim Wisted, I'm sorry to
Oh, crush.
mention that the motion to induct Jim Wisted as a member of Sunday Night Example Toastmasters has been defeated.
I don't know if I'll be able to pick the pieces up, but
You've been deducted.
That's a good example to use for this Sunday night event to show
Yes.
what should happen if a member doesn't get approved. Although
Wow.
it rarely happens in Toastmasters, but that is how you would handle it if it did.
Okay.
I put a question in chat. When you get a chance, if you could address that.
Okay,
Thank you.
Catherine Ryan. I don't. Can a current club executive committee vote on an item of which would continue the term of a future club executive committee? Normally, yes, because the future executive committee can rescind, they can repeal a motion that was previously passed, and or can make a new motion to change that item of business at any time. The only thing that would necessarily carry over is financial commitments, which, just like governments or any other organizations, the financial implications will always affect future executives. There's no way to necessarily prohibit that.
TI doesn't like it, but there's nothing in the rules that says you can't. They
There's-
discourage people from sitting on the executive into what I call perpetuity, but they try and have everybody do no more than 2 years in a row, especially the presidents. I like to rotate them, or you kind of get somebody that owns the club after a while. But that's more not Robert's rules. That's more just a Toastmaster.
Toastmasters
Rules.
protocol.
Yeah.
As far as Robert's rules is concerned, the terms of executive could go on as many repetitive times as they want. Winifred Quack, what's your question? Will you please unmute your microphone?
Only you can hear you.
Thank you. Is it possible, or how is it done, to repeal a decision taken at another meeting? If there was a quorum and somebody objects, then is there a possibility?
Is there a possibility?
To appeal?
Yes. So let's say that there was a motion at last Sunday night's example Toastmasters meeting, although there wasn't one, but pretend there was, to spend $50 to buy 24 beer for the club at a celebration. And someone thought that was a frivolous, useless waste of money. So this meeting, they open the business. Is there any old business to be addressed? At this time, the member would come up and make a thing. I move to repeal the motion to spend $50 on 24 beer for a celebration. And so as long as the money hasn't been spent already, and that person, someone then let's say Marlene Clark then seconds that motion, we debate on it, and then if we vote to repeal it, that previously passed motion is then repealed from the old business.
Okay,
And then the meeting goes on to cover new business afterwards.
okay. Thank you.
Are there any further questions?
It's not a question, it is my observation. Pardon me. I have attended a couple of clubs, and generally, if you want to join the club, they'll immediately refer you to VP membership. They give you a package, and immediately you fill in the application, write a check, and give it. That's it. And then you are a member. I have not seen the proper procedures. That is why I'm joining this, because I want to know how is the parliamentary procedure. I'm
Yes,
completely blinded, and I have not seen these things in many clubs.
And there should be an escorting out of the room at this time, and this is what Toastmasters actually specifies on how to induct a member.
Okay.
It depends on the club, but the new member pledge is often recited immediately after the motion is passed.
Okay, thank you.
But as for business procedure, that part may it not be necessary.
I also too know that in some of the TI briefings, there's been a complaint from a lot of clubs that this isn't followed, but Toastmasters consider this to be very, very important. A lot of clubs do waive it off and just bring a member in and don't do any kind of initiation. And TI actually strongly wants clubs to do it, but I think there's been a lot of clubs for a lot of years that just kind of get a member, give them a package, we're all happy, take their money, and that's it. You're still supposed to vote them in.
For instance, if a member was contentious and the club decided they didn't want them, as shown in our example procedure tonight, that's the importance of why we induct members in that way. It gives the existing members of a club to freely debate on a new member joining without being prejudiced against.
May almost be one of those things that area directors have to really start asking, are you doing this? Are you doing this? Are you doing this? Because I just think a lot of clubs it just went by the wayside. I don't think it was anything intentional. They just kind of carried on, and TI is really big on this.
I've noticed that at least Riverview Canusa and my former club Carlingwood both did this to a T.
So did Spirit Ed Toastmasters. And it struck me. I thought, why am I being cast into a room? What's going on? Don't you want me? It kind of surprised me because it's not really out there promoted, that procedure that I can see like on the TI website.
Yes.
I hope that this demonstration that I did clarifies exactly why we do that.
Yes, it did. I don't feel so outcast anymore.
I think it's because the officers focus more on membership than the procedure. So I want more members, 20 members, 20 plus members. So just if you're ready to give me a check, that's fine, you're a member. That's the attitude I see.
And though I've never seen this actually happen in a club since I joined Toastmasters, but the same thing would be done to vote out a member. We would also have to escort the member from the room while the debate happens.
I've heard one incident.
Yeah.
That's a tough one for a club to do.
Well, I think it's an exceptional achievement to make your club want to cast you out. Kristian, are you able to share the PowerPoint presentation with us, like potentially put it in chat? Like I thought it was really well outlined.
Okay.
You beat this to a T. This is like, I really
the
love the
point.
bare bones of how you did it.
And is focused on TI and Toastmaster clubs.
Absolutely.
Yes,
Well done.
that's exactly why I had done that.
And honestly, there aren't a lot of resources on Toastmasters International on Robert's Rules of Orders. There's an article that was in Toastmasters magazine.
Right.
I'm really shocked there isn't more. And then I found some sort of presentation that was done. It looked like a Toastmasters document, like a leader's guide for a presentation on parliamentary procedure. But I don't know. It's like it was a resource that has the official template, but I could only find it in one link. Like it's not on the TI website easily to find. So
Okay.
I'm venting a bit about the lack of order in Robert's Rules of Order online, because I think what we do is we conduct meetings, we make decisions. I'm glad that you did this. This is something that I think TI has an opportunity to make this
Yes.
more
And-
accessible.
I'm kind of saddened that they used to make this a lot more clear than they do now.
Mhm.
As
It-
a new member, I was inducted into our club here in Summerside, but I was not asked to leave the room. And next year I'm going to be the VP of membership. So that's why I asked the question. And I'm the same. There's not a lot of information on Robert's rules, and I'd like to know more about that. And I see it being used at a meeting, but I don't really know what the rules are. I want to know.
Yes.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It was
Mhm.
excellent.
Yeah, it was one of the better ones I've seen focused right on a Toastmaster. A lot of times you get the generic Robert's Rules of Order, and
Yes. It took me a while to do that. And
I wonder if I'm certainly going to talk to our VP of Education too, because she's actually my mentor. So I'm sure our club will be very interested in seeing a copy of your presentation for
yes.
sure.
it's a small crew, but they missed a real good presentation. It's
Yes.
too bad. I mean, I think a lot of people could use to see if they had one person from every executive, this would have been useful.
Yes.
Even just to understand like the difference between,
I
tabling
had-
a motion and, and just
I had originally prepared this presentation as an educational section for Riverview Canusa Toastmasters, as it seemed that everyone wanted to know what I was doing when they asked me to chair a business meeting, and were confused, and some members were upset when someone tried to speak out, and I kept going and indicated the chair has not recognized so-and-so. And then I went through the details broke down why we do it and explained what the purpose of it was. Because we had some members, including two people that quit and transferred to another club because they felt that Robert's rules were rude.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
However, we gained a whole bunch of new members, including some running for council that aren't offended by it at all.
They self-casted. Oh my heavens.
This
But
should
when
be
you-
part of TLI training.
Mhm.
Well, we're heading up on 9 o'clock, so
Okay.
did you want me to close the meeting or do you have more, Christian?
So I have one more question. I'm having difficulty in joining you every week. I try, and the moment I see it in Facebook, I put going, and then I don't find the link. I'm not able to get in, and then I have to message it. So how do you can actually add my name to your link?
Okay. We don't, usually we have these webinars every second week. So
Oh,
it depends how many subjects we have. I know there's been other webinars put through the week. Like I know the Club Growth does a little bit of a series on a couple of things like mentoring stuff. But these have been more of the education ones. And they're usually every
Yes.
second. I can make sure you're on the list though, and you
if
get the link.
I'm on the list, and I can let my members know also. Come on, they are the future leaders, so they can join and they can learn.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I am going to shut the recording off so everybody's aware. So I'm going to pause it. I'm going to stop, right? Which one stop? Stop. Make sure you want to stop.